That's what has to happen. It has to sting. Every time they do this, it has to sting. They have to lose seats. They have to be trashed in the press. They have to constantly be harassed and told, this is not what we want from you. You are failing us. You are not beholden to the pro-choicers you're supposed to oppose. Get out of office. You do not belong in there if you're not going to fight this. It's ridiculous. That's what we should do. But instead, we're just going along to get along.
For a second, as you were doing that, I was imagining in my head, would a pro-lifer ever say this? And then I kind of internally laughed a little bit. No, they would never do anything like that.
Yeah.
Because they will support the R no matter what.
Yep.
No matter what.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Liberator podcast. I'm Sam Riley, and I'm here with James Silberman. Russell Hunter is not going to be with us this time, but we do have an awesome episode planned for you guys. We're going to be going over an article by a federal appointed judge. He was appointed by George W. Bush. He was a 10th Circuit judge, and he wrote a very good article for the Washington Post, and we're going to be going over that this episode. So let's get into the content.
So this is written by Michael McConnell, and he is, again, a Stanford professor, former federal judge, and this is in the Washington Post. Mm-hmm. Now, this is really, really incredible for a number of reasons. He's going to talk about how abortion rights are not threatened.
Yeah.
Even with Amy Coney Barrett being appointed, abortion rights are not under threat. And the other thing he talks about, which is the really important one, which we'll get to toward the end of this episode, is how many Republicans, and certainly the leaders within the party, love Roe v. Wade. Mm-hmm. And this article goes into why they love Roe v. Wade, which is a scandalous thing to say. Right? The leaders of the Republican Party love Roe v. Wade. But it's true. It makes their life really, really easy. Mm-hmm.
Wasn't there someone who, one of the senators said to Rand Paul one time that they didn't want Roe overturned?
Yeah, we are writing about that in an article that we just put out recently on our blog. Mm-hmm. And Rand Paul was speaking at, it was like an evangelical voter summit or something to that effect. And he gets on stage and he says, we had the votes to defund Planned Parenthood back in 2016 and 17. Or it would have been
that was it, yeah.
Back in 2017. And I was asking a Senate Republican leader, why didn't we bring that up for a vote? It would have passed. And the Senate Republican leader says, we didn't bring it up for a vote because, quote, we might win. Mm-hmm. Right? They don't want to win. They don't want to make progress on abortion. They want to pay lip service, pretend they're doing all they can do, but their hands are tied behind their back, and get pro-life votes and donors for doing it. And pro-life voters and donors fall for it every time. Mm-hmm. Every time. So anyway, we're going to get to that part towards more along those lines toward the end of this episode. But anyways, let's start off with the beginning of this article, talking about how abortion rights are not under threat even with the current nominee. So McConnell writes, confirming Judge Amy Coney Barrett would not, quote, transform the court for a generation, unquote. It also would not end abortion rights or destroy the Affordable Care Act. And then he continues below, even the current court, with a solid majority of 5 conservative-seeming justices, has decided many of the most important cases over the past year in favor of the liberal position. Consider Bostock, which interpreted Title VII to apply to same-sex and transgender discrimination, Regents, striking down Trump's revocation of DACA, and Vance, allowing the New York District Attorney to subpoena Trump's financial records. This is because modern conservative legal theory is primarily about methodology rather than results. He continues, what about abortion rights? Well, in confirmation battles going back to the 1980s, abortion rights advocates have predicted that every nominee by a Republican president, if confirmed, would mean the reversal of Roe v. Wade. And by the way, every anti-abortion lobbyist has said the same thing. Mm-hmm. Everyone on both sides pretends that every nominee is going to be the end of Roe.
Yeah.
And here we are. He continues, yet it has never happened. Yet Roe's never been overturned. Republican presidents have filled 9 seats since Ronald Reagan was elected president. 9 times the nation was warned that Roe is on the chopping block. Somehow the blade never falls. Roe was reaffirmed this summer, in effect by June Medical, with a majority opinion written by Chief Justice John G. Roberts, Jr., an appointee of President George W. Bush, an appointee who National Right to Life and all those groups were campaigning like crazy for, right? Well, what we've seen for Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, it was to that level, or at least very close to it, for John Roberts.
Well, I don't know. It seems like Ruth Bader Ginsburg was forcing all of the other justices to vote for abortion, right? Now that she's gone, she's not going to do it anymore.
I suppose so.
That's the hope, right? We just got to keep going, keep doing this.
Yeah. And so he continues, Roe is the road runner of all precedents. Wile E. Coyote just never catches up.
Yeah, it's sickening. It's just, this is so obvious. You read this stuff and it's like, yeah, we know this stuff. We know this is what's happening, and it's refreshing to hear it. But it's incredible to me that pro-lifers aren't the ones who are going out and trashing terrible candidates. Like just saying, this is what they said here, and documenting all this stuff. They should be the ones going in and saying, these are terrible candidates, and we demand that our president elect someone that's actually going to do something in conformity to their strategy. It's not like abolitionists are like the ones who are super concerned about getting a really solid Supreme Court. We're concerned about nullification. We're concerned about state defiance and states' rights, state sovereignty.
Right, standing up to the Supreme Court.
Right. But their strategy, they should be the ones that are going out and exposing this stuff, and they never, ever do it.
Right.
They always sign on with the candidate.
Yeah. We had an article on the blog today about how the pro-life movement is being played like a fiddle by the Republican establishment. The pro-life movement is essentially a get-out-the-vote project for the Republican Party. And so they're going to go along with whatever the Republican Party does. Doesn't matter how bad a candidate is nominated. Doesn't matter how much the candidate says Roe is super precedent. Doesn't matter how much they talk about the importance of precedent and all those things. The pro-life movement will support whoever the candidate is nominated by a president with an R next to their name. Yeah, and it's to their own detriment. And so that's how you get a situation where we have an 8-1 Republican appointed majority in 1992, and the one Democrat was pro-life. We talked about this last week. The one Democrat on that court, Byron White, was appointed by a Democrat, and he was a dissenter in Roe v. Wade. So you had 8 Republican appointees, a dissenter from Roe v. Wade. It should have been a slam dunk. But because they support anyone, even that court upheld Roe v. Wade, upheld legal abortion. Yeah. And then as far as the current court, we've got Clarence Thomas, who has said Roe must be overturned, and he's all alone. He's all alone. And every time he writes either a dissent or a concurrence by himself, a separate dissent or separate concurrence, saying Roe should be overturned. This time he called it grievously wrong and must be overturned, is what he said in the June Medical case. Yeah. And no one joins him. Alito has had chance after chance to join him, hasn't done it. Roberts has had chance after chance to join him, hasn't done it. Gorsuch and Kavanaugh have now had a chance to join Clarence Thomas in saying Roe should be overturned, and they didn't do it. Yeah. So we have one justice who said Roe should be overturned. In the case of Kavanaugh, we quoted Susan Collins last week, right? And Susan Collins was saying, in my conversations with Kavanaugh, he was the most pro-precedent judge I have ever spoken to. Right? She was saying Kavanaugh thinks that precedent comes from Article 3 of the Constitution. It's not just like a theory. It's literally the Constitution, which is, that's nuts. Yeah. that's crazy, and like just an idolatry of precedent. And then as far as John Roberts, let's get a John Roberts quote in here. Yeah. So in the recent case, June Medical Services v. Rousseau, so just for some context, 4 years ago, there was a case identical to this one. So it was saying that abortion clinics in Texas must have admitting privileges at a hospital. Now, the Supreme Court struck that down. It was a 5-4 decision. Roberts was in the 4. He was in the minority. So you would assume that the case comes back to the Supreme Court, the same exact case, except from Louisiana. So it was a bill from Louisiana saying Louisiana abortion clinics must get admitting privileges at a nearby hospital. So you think, well, it's the exact same case. Roberts is going to vote the same way that he did 4 years ago, right? That's what you would expect. And because Anthony Kennedy is off the court and Brett Kavanaugh is on the court, it should switch. But here's what John Roberts says. He says, I joined the dissent in Whole Women's Health, which is the Texas case, and continued to believe that the case was wrongly decided. But the question today, however, is not whether whole women's health was right or wrong, but whether to adhere to it in the present case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just insane. The second part of this quote, too, is pretty crazy. He says, the legal doctrine of stare decisis requires us, absent special circumstances, to treat like cases alike. The Louisiana law imposes a burden on access to abortion just as severe as that imposed by the Texas law for the same reasons. Therefore, Louisiana's law cannot stand under our precedents. It's not 14th Amendment. It's not all human beings are made in the image of God. It's not we have certain inalienable rights. It's we have decided badly in the past, and we are going to continue to decide badly in the future because we respect stare decisis. We respect precedent.
Right. So he's saying John Roberts is saying in no uncertain terms, this decision goes against the Constitution. Mm-hmm. What the decision I am voting for, I am making the majority opinion, is against the Constitution. Mm-hmm. But I'm still going to vote that way, even though I believe it violates the Constitution. Mm-hmm. I'm still going to vote that way because that's how we voted.
Yeah,
that's how we voted 4 years ago.
Yeah,
right. And so John Roberts, the pro-life movement wants John Roberts to overturn a 47-year precedent, mm-hmm. right? 47 years. It's been reaffirmed 38 times. 38 abortion-related cases have come before the court since Roe. Mm-hmm. 47 years. And he won't even overturn 4 years of precedent.
Was he on the pro-abortion side the last time with the ruling 4 years prior?
No. He was. Yeah, he said that
at the time he was against it.
Yeah, he was in the floor. That was the minority of that case,
which really explains why we see Roberts slipping so much over the years. It's not so much that his principles or anything are changing. He's just following his principle consistently. He is seeing the court making all these bad decisions, and then he just adopts those bad decisions as his own 4 years later, not because he believes they're any more correct, but just because he is so committed to precedent that he's going to continue to do it.
And he calls that a legal theory.
Yeah.
In law school, it's called that a legal theory.
Yeah.
That we should rule against the Constitution just because a previous court did. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's nuts. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah. And he actually goes on. There's a little bit more in his opinion in this case. Mm-hmm. He says, under principles of stare decisis, I agree with the plurality that the determination in whole women's health that Texas's law imposed a substantial obstacle requires the same determination about Louisiana's law. Under those same principles, I would adhere to the holding of Casey requiring a substantial obstacle before striking down an abortion regulation. Right? So I'm gonna uphold whole women's health, which is the case from 4 years ago, and I'm gonna uphold Casey, which is Planned Parenthood v. Casey. Mm-hmm. And so again, asking this guy to overturn Roe, I mean, you're nuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like to put your faith in this to overturn Roe is just crazy. But if someone just like John Roberts got appointed to appoint or to replace the next Supreme Court opening, the pro-life movement's going to be all for it. They're going to be their biggest fan, championing him as long as they're nominated by a president with an R next to their name, and that's why we're here.
The incredible thing about all of this is a bunch of these judges, except for Thomas, can all get together, and if we have nine justices who all believe firmly that Roe v. Wade was wrongly decided, that we should not have legalized abortion, and it is completely anti-Constitution, with the opinions of Roberts and many of the other justices that we've seen so far, they would still get together and say it's wrong, but we're going to keep doing it.
Right. If we had 9 John Roberts, that's probably what would happen.
Yeah. I mean, like, not even John Roberts, like the quotes that we've read by Amy Coney Barrett, the ones that we've read by Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, all of these guys are pretty much down the line very strong precedent people, stronger than the Constitution, because that's the way they rule. That's their track record. So it's just incredible to be reading this and still be thinking, there's still people out there thinking, we just need to get enough people on that court who are actually going to, for whatever reason, despite the fact that none of them have so far, overturn Roe instead of just defying it. Obviously, these people are very concerned about the credibility of the court. And since they're so concerned about the credibility of the court, the biggest blow you can possibly give them is to defy them, It is to say that we do not respect you anymore because as an institution you have ruled wickedly and anti-constitutionally, and we're not going to put up with it anymore. It's ridiculous. There's no reason that any moral person would ever want anything to do with that wicked court. That's the thing that's going to get a lot of these people, a lot of these Supreme Court justices and a lot of these hopeful Supreme Court justices in the federal courts to say, hold on, we're losing our credibility. Because that's actually something they have gone on the record time and time again. They have said, we care about this. We care about the American people trusting this institution, even though the American people, a lot of the times, don't trust that institution and they hate that institution. So it's like...
Yeah, no, it's a really important point because John Roberts, he really is a leaf in the wind, right?
Yeah.
Wherever the culture is drifting is where John Roberts is drifting, and we saw that with Obamacare in the oral arguments for Obamacare, the Sebelius case.
Yeah.
John Roberts, from the questions he was asking, everyone was sure that he was going to rule against Obamacare. It was a case about the definition of what's a tax or what is a fine, and Roberts looked like an obvious anti-Obamacare vote.
Yeah.
And so when the left saw that, they just went crazy in the media for months between the oral arguments and when the decision came down in the summer. They were just going crazy on him. If John Roberts strikes on Obamacare, the court's going to lose all credibility and all this stuff. And they just ramped up the pressure on John Roberts, who was obviously going to rule against Obamacare, and he caved. That's what he does. He caves to pressure. He caves to where the culture is drifting, to where the pressure is coming from.
Yeah.
And so we're also going to get into this a bit later.
Was that the first time they had ruled on Obamacare?
First time the Supreme Court had, but a lot of lower courts, so the circuit courts and
upheld it.
I think the lower courts I think were split on it. I think it went back and forth, and then the Supreme Court eventually upheld it.
Yeah.
In any case, he's a leaf in the wind. He responds to pressure from the culture, and we're going to get into this later, but the pro-life movement applies no pressure.
Yeah.
Their pro-life movement strategy is unconditional submission to the Supreme Court.
And even if it isn't, if there is substantial pressure on him, and I think he does respond to that, but I think he just gives into peer pressure a lot too, because whenever his colleagues, whether dead or alive, say something, he's just going to go along with it too. So, yeah. So back to the article. There are reasons Roe is so resilient, and this is the article written by federal judge
Michael McConnell.
Michael McConnell, yeah. There are reasons Roe is so resilient, and one of them is not the legal persuasiveness of the opinion, which is nil, but the ruling is nearly a half-century old and has been reaffirmed multiple times by justices of both parties. Such a decision will not be lightly overruled. So he's just saying here exactly what we've been talking about, right? Exactly the things that Roberts has been saying. This is just going to continue as long as we get court justices who care far more about their own opinions than they do about the Constitution, because that's really what this is.
Right.
This is a bunch of their
about
opinions.
Their own opinions and about the opinions of previous courts over the Constitution. And Roberts actually fleshed out this article, also going back to Roberts' opinion from June Medical. He fleshes this idea out about just this idolatry of precedents, and he explains why they idolize precedents. So here's what John Roberts says, defending the idea of upholding, of striking down the Louisiana case, even though he opposed the same ruling 4 years earlier. Here's what he says. Adherence to precedent is necessary to avoid an arbitrary discretion in the courts. Right? So what he's saying is that if we rule the same way previous courts have, that means we're rejecting arbitrariness, right? And it's so crazy because the polar opposite of that is truth. He is exactly polar opposite from what the truth is.
Yeah.
And the truth is that Roe is the definition of arbitrary.
Yeah.
And Supreme Court and legal scholars left, right, and center will all admit this. There was nothing, there was no serious constitutional argument to be made in favor of Roe. It was an arbitrary decision of a court that wanted to insert its own opinions into the Constitution. That's widely agreed upon. And so arbitrariness is when justices do that. When they adhere to the Constitution is when there's a lack of arbitrariness. But he's arguing that we have to uphold arbitrary opinions or else will appear like we're arbitrary. It's crazy. It's just this crazy belief.
Yeah, it reminds me of just worldview and epistemology, like the idea of Christians having their main authority, sola scriptura, being the Word of God, right? A lot of what we see in Protestantism nowadays is sort of this, me and my Bible under the tree somewhere, where people just sort of come up with their own opinions about things based on what they're seeing out in the world, don't really care about what the Bible says ultimately. And then whenever you confront them with things from the Bible, they start to base it on their own opinion or try to discredit what the Bible is saying. And this is just a epistemological shift for Roberts. He's shifting from what the Constitution says, what the law says, what legislators have given him to interpret. And then he is saying that, no, it's just a matter of our opinions, really. Like, our opinions are the things we have to be grounded on, because if we're not grounded on our own opinions, we're arbitrary. No.
Arbitrary is arbitrary.
If you are grounded on something else, something objective, something that people can all read and interpret, that's the thing that's going to be non-arbitrary. But the thing that is arbitrary is you guys just going on your old opinions that you all know are wrong and then continuing on a more and more arbitrary path. Because eventually you're just, what we already have is just stacked up opinions year after year after year that really has nothing to do with the text that it's talking about anymore. It's just talking about the history of bad cases that have been decided for that. It's nothing to do with what the Constitution actually says, and no one can make a good constitutional argument for abortion.
Yeah, no, there's a very good parallel there. I like it. So like the obviously sola scriptura was a really important aspect of the Protestant Reformation, right? And in theory, what Supreme Court justices are supposed to base their rulings and opinions on is sola constitution, right? But like back then at the Protestant Reformation time, we didn't have sola scriptura. We had a situation where it was sola whatever the popes and councils say, right? And then this Protestant said, no, sola scriptura, whatever God's word says. And there really is a parallel, not to make a parallel between the Bible and the Constitution. The Bible is divine. It's God's word. The Constitution is a political document that is not God's word. I'm not making that comparison, but it is to say that in theory, they are supposed to rule sola constitution. But instead, it's sola whatever the Supreme Court justices say, even if it goes against the Constitution, even if I know it goes against the Constitution, sola whatever the previous court said.
Yeah, and it really shows the Protestant roots of this nation, because when you see things in the 10th Amendment, the 10th Amendment, like saying exactly the idea that when you have a single, tribunal that is the one thing that's going to interpret this thing, I guess, infallibly, right? Yeah. And when they err, right, you have recourse for that. You've got the ability to nullify their opinions and go against what they're saying if what they're saying is so egregious that you need to be able to go against it, right?
Right.
And so I think it really shows the genius of the founding, that when we laid down our laws the way we did, it had so many checks and balances, but people have thrown out those checks and balances because of laziness, because of maybe a lack of motivation to actually do it. I think what we're talking about here is, the GOP, for the most part, this is it's one of the only very valuable things that they can hold on to, because the culture is slipping on them on everything else. They have a lot of things they could point to and say, we have reasons to vote for us, right? If they're actually going to fight. The thing is, they're not actually going to fight. And people were like, well, if things are going to be terrible anyways, I might as well just go for the opposition, which is what we're seeing with a lot of evangelicals and a lot of mainstream evangelicals that are going that way. So I think that, with all of this that we're reading, it just
right.
It reinforces the idea that, no, we have a better way to go about this. These people are beholden to their own precedent, and they're not going to change because they've got their finger on the pulse of the culture, right?
Right.
Social reformers are always usually in the minority, and it's the demand that gets the culture to change. It's the demand, the consistent demand for justice, not this, let's try to build a big coalition and let's try to get a whole bunch of people in there.
And compromise as much as we have to grow the coalition.
Right.
No, it's staking out a righteous, consistent position and holding to it, and incessantly pushing that position in the culture and making the culture acknowledge it. But I like the point about, you said, you brought up the 10th Amendment. Thomas Jefferson said nullification is a natural right, which I absolutely agree with. You always have the natural inherent right to stand up to a superior who is telling you to do something evil. Yeah. So, and the 10th Amendment says that all rights not spelled out in the Constitution are still reserved to the states and to the people. And so that right to stand up to a superior, if they're telling you to do something evil, which is what Roe is, it's the Supreme Court telling the states, you must allow mass murder in your jurisdictions. That's evil. And we should stand up against that. And yeah, the 10th Amendment protects the natural right to nullify.
And you can really see Jefferson's stamp all over the Constitution. You can see it in the 10th Amendment. You can see it in the Second Amendment, which says that, the reason that you are able to bear arms, the reason that you're able to form a militia is because when a government gets so oppressive that it has to be thrown off, that is the kind of thing that's the reason it's there. Right now that we're saying we're going to throw off any government or anything right now, but or going to create a violent insurrection or anything like that. But the reason they baked in these things was because the idea was the government actually has to be more afraid of the people than the people are of the government.
Right.
Because when the people are afraid of the government, things get horrible.
Right. And then that's what the Declaration of Independence, over and over about. When governments become destructive of these ends, it's the right of people to alter or abolish it.
Yeah.
And so, that really was, like you said, just baked into everything. But all that kind of goes ignored today. So anyway, let's move on through the article here. So McConnell continues. Whatever one may think of abortion, the practice is so widespread and ingrained that the right to it is so intensely defended by a significant minority of Americans that trying to use the force of the state to end it would wrench the nation apart. And so this is kind of what we were going to earlier, right? The Supreme Court, especially Roberts, but also the other justices, are leaves in the wind of the culture. And so right now they're very afraid of pro-aborts. They're afraid if we not even if we outlaw abortion, if we say the unborn child is a person and abortion is illegal in the whole country, not even if we do that, but even if we say the states have a right to do what they want on abortion, they're afraid of what the pro-aborts will do. They're afraid of the pro-aborts seceding or...
Yeah, which is really incredibly stupid to be afraid of pro-aborts. They might say something bad to me on the internet. They might post their dumb memes all over the comments. Guys, by the way,
and
every
give
single
lots
time...
of laugh reacts.
Yeah. Every time you ratio our posts, guys, you're boosting it like crazy. So thanks so much for that. We appreciate that. It's something we love. We see it every time, and we just think, man, our reach is getting so much better. Like, you can look at the laughs, but our likes are way up too. So, and this meme that's like violently depicting abortion through drawing or through whatever, you're showing it to everyone. So keep that up, guys. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. A little sidebar there to all our haters. But yeah. Anyway, the court is so afraid of what pro-aborts will do if they'll secede from the union or if they'll delegitimize the Supreme Court or whatever they'll do. Yeah. And they're not afraid one bit of pro-lifers. They know nothing will happen. They can rule that abortion is a constitutional right as many times as they want to, and pro-lifers will do nothing. Nothing. The Supreme Court knows it. And that's why they keep upholding legal abortion, because pro-lifers make no demand. Right? We've got I don't know if you guys can see it on any of these camera angles up here, but we've got a Frederick Douglass poster up near the wall behind us. And Frederick Douglass said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand." The Supreme Court has grabbed power for itself that was not its own power. It took power from the legislative branch. It legislated on abortion, right? It took power. And they're not going to give that back either to the states, or they're not going to give rights back to preborn children. They're not going to do that if we continue to tell them we unconditionally submit to you, no matter how evil, no matter how unconstitutional, no matter how many times we're betrayed by the people that we were told we're going to overturn Roe. No matter what, the pro-life movement is telling the Supreme Court, we will submit.
Yeah.
And that's why we have what we have. The Supreme Court's afraid of pro-aborts. They're not afraid of pro-lifers.
Yeah, and right now I'm reading Garrison, and he's got some excellent satire. Like, he is such a good writer, and one of the things that he says, and he's writing the satirical
William
piece.
Lloyd Garrison, yeah. He's writing the satirical piece just trying to paint the slavery, the pro-slavery movement in as honest terms as he possibly can. And he just says, in one of his points, he says that if a white man is to throw off his tyrant, is to kill his tyrant, if he's to go and just kill the person who's being a tyrant to him, then he's a hero and he deserves statues and monuments. But if a black man does it to his slave owner, to his master, then he's horrible and he has to be burned. And Garrison was like a pacifist, right? He's not like someone who's calling for violent insurrection or anything. Right. He tried to stop John Brown. He was a legit pacifist. Yeah,
and he is just showing the hypocrisy of this, of the idea that you have this idea of violent insurrection held up as something that is just such a good thing. The American Revolution is so praised in America, right? And we have become the most tame, timid, weak people to ever champion a cause. It's like the people who are in the pro-life movement, no one is afraid of them whatsoever. There's nothing about them that could possibly terrify anyone. It couldn't terrify a tyrant. The idea that they're going to nullify Roe v. Wade is laughable. They would never do that. They're always about just coming to the table and having a fruitful discussion and type thing. And, we can agree to disagree. No, this isn't a discussion. Abortion is a moral evil. It is wicked. It is awful. God is storing up wrath for America because we are murdering children year after year. That is something that we must end now. No man can stand in the way of that. There's not a man on earth that should be able to stand in the way of murdering babies. And if they were to do something...
This should stand in the way of the people trying to stop the murder of babies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so it's just... It's really sad to see the main people that are going about protecting babies engaging in such weak, horrible efforts. Like Students for Life, they did this whole campaign recently saying that we need to do something about abortifacient drugs because they're bad for the environment, because aborted babies are going to the toilet. Who is going to... No one cares about your demands. Like, that's your demand. They're murdering babies, but they're putting them in the toilet, and it's going to cause a health concern, or not even a health concern. It was like an environmental concern. It's insane, and that's their campaign right now.
Save the trees by stopping... Stop chemical abortions to save the trees, right?
Yeah.
Absurdity. It's absolute absurdity. Mm-hmm. But that's what they've got to resort to because they can't say, let's abolish abortion tomorrow, right? They can't make the claim that they want to make unless they say defy the court, but they won't do that.
Because their strategy precludes them from it, right?
Right.
And it's not just, I think part of it is their strategy precludes it from them, but when we see people like Abby Johnson, who openly says things like, if we were to do that, we would get defunded, and it's not pro-life to not have all the social programs that are helping mothers and things like that.
Abby Johnson posts on Facebook, and she lives in Texas, and there's an abolition bill in Texas. And so she posts, in opposition to the Abolition of Abortion in Texas Act, she says, if we do this, the federal government might take away education programs. And they might take away the funding for our roads. And how is that pro-life? Right? It's just, think of the priorities there. It's like they don't... It's almost like I don't want to make the assumption of them, but at the very least, they're acting like they don't really believe abortion's murder. Because if abortion's really murder, that is lunacy, right? And it's wicked. It's absolutely evil if you actually believe abortion's murder, but you also think, we can't lose our funding for the roads. If you actually think abortion's murder, that is evil. That is truly evil. And so I guess I don't want to... In every case, I don't want to make assumptions of their motives, but in any case, their actions appear to make it look like they don't really believe abortion's murder. Yeah. And that's hard to say, but
demand definitely doesn't match it, and the government pays attention, right? They know that the pro-lifers are not asking anything more than defunding right now, or anything more than some basic environmental measures.
And they know that pro-lifers will do nothing if the court doesn't give it to them.
Yeah.
They know nothing will happen.
Yeah.
So
continuing with the article, the politics would not be kind to pro-lifers.
The politics of overturning Roe.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Right now, abortion-related disputes concern marginal cases, such as late-term abortions, parental consent, sex selection, sex-selective abortion, and disposal of fetal remains, exactly what we're talking about just now, where public opinion is divided and the majority might even support increased restrictions. If Roe were overruled, the debate would shift to out-and-out prohibitions, where public opinion is squarely on the side of abortion rights. Republican Party primaries would feature fights to the death between purists and compromisers, and a united pro-choice Democratic Party would gain the advantage. And that's actually...
incredible.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what we're seeing in Oklahoma right now. We're seeing, consistent people like Warren Hamilton. He is going to try and abolish abortion. He's going to, and when I say try, he's actually going to propose a bill to abolish abortion. The try part is whether or not pro-lifers are going to get on board and actually support it. Be bold and, do something that is actually going to save babies, actually going to establish justice. More than that, it's going to establish justice, which is what we're looking for. It's the actual establishment of what God is asking for, is criminalization of the act. It's not just slapping on a small fine or something like that. It's not just for the sole goal of saving some babies. It's for the goal of establishing justice and punishing someone who murders their baby, because that is what we have to be demanding.
Right. And the just incredible thing about this paragraph, right now, abortion-related disputes concern marginal cases such as late-term abortions and all that, right? That is why Republican leaders and many Republicans love Roe v. Wade, right? Because with Roe v. Wade, they get to pretend like their hands are behind their back and all we can do is pass late-term abortion bans. And who could oppose that, right? It's an easy win for Republicans. Roe v. Wade provides easy wins for Republicans because they get to just ban late-term abortion, they get to ban partial birth abortion, they get to ban torturous abortions beyond 20 weeks or whatever, and they get to pretend that that's all they can do, that these easy wins are all they can do. And it's the perfect arrangement. If you just want to maintain Republican power, Roe v. Wade is the perfect arrangement for you because you get to pretend like your hands are behind your back and you get to take easy win after easy win that don't really do anything. It's the perfect arrangement for Republican politicians, and that's why many Republicans love Roe v. Wade. Now, another point, and you touched on this. If Roe were overruled, the debate would shift to out-and-out prohibition. So no longer about just late-term abortions. The debate would shift to actual abolition. And Republican primaries would feature fights to the death between purists and compromisers. Now, like you said, we're already doing that. We don't care if Roe v. Wade's overturned or not. We're making Republican primaries about someone who wants to abolish abortion versus the compromisers. We're doing that regardless of whether Roe v. Wade. And Warren Hamilton defeated Larry Boggs. The abolitionists defeated the incremental pro-lifers. In Indiana, John Jacob defeated
not a fight to the death, but it might have come to blows at one point.
Close. It came very close to a fight to the death.
Not on Warren's part, by the way. It's never on the part of the abolitionist. It's always on the part of the anti-abolitionist who starts swinging or threatening to swing or to go outside and to put up your dukes or whatever.
A very contentious primary. And the abolitionists, was threatened with violence at that one meeting at the Haskell County GOP. But the abolitionists came out on top. So again, on this point, we're doing this regardless of whether Roe's overturned. But his point, McConnell's point in saying this, is that if Roe is overruled, the whole abortion debate shifts from, do we ban late-term abortions? Do we ban partial birth abortions? And it shifts to, do we ban all abortions? The Republican Party wants to avoid that like the plague. They hate that idea that they'll actually have to stand on principle, make a consistent and righteous case that they may take some hits for. That's a harder sell to the people in the middle, maybe. They hate that idea.
And the more I talk to legislators here, even pro-life Christian legislators who I talk to, I realize they have really compromised views of even what abortion, what the moral standard is for abortion, whether or not it's something that, it's ever acceptable. They'll say things like rape exceptions frequently. They'll say things like, even the bills that they're proposing, they'll align their belief to whatever they think the culture is telling them to do. Like there's a guy you talked to in Ohio who said that he believes that the soul is, he doesn't become a person until he has got a beating heart.
Right. So Sam and I both used to live in Ohio when we were working for a pro-life group. And I met with my state senator after I became an abolitionist and said, hey, here's what an abolition bill is. Here's why it's important and why it needs to happen. And I was talking to his aide, not to him directly, but to his legislative aide. And she tells me, this is really interesting, but it's Senator Brenner's personal religious conviction that life begins at a heartbeat. And I was like, I told her straight up, like, that's like objectively wrong. Like God's word tells us how ridiculous an idea that is. 99% of scientists, and even the 1% who disagree, that they're disagreeing for political reasons. Every scientist knows life begins at conception. Everyone who's graduated 6th grade knows that life begins at conception, right? So everyone knows that, but this state senator believes that life begins at a heartbeat. And the reason he believes that, and the reason...
It's his personal moral personal religious moral conviction.
She kept repeating that, his personal religious conviction, over and over.
I have a personal religious conviction about biological facts.
Just crazy, but anyway, he believes this, and actually I saw it in a pro-life Facebook group I'm in. There was a poll, when does life begin? Like 7% of people in this pro-life group said life began at a heartbeat. And so it's not just one senator, but the fact that it's a senator saying that shows it's not just some random people on Facebook who saw a heartbeat bill meme. A senator believes it, and he believes it because he spent 4, 5, 6 years, however many years it was, championing the heartbeat bill. And when you champion compromise, your principles get compromised.
Yeah.
Because you have to argue abortion's wrong because it stops a beating heart. Abortion's wrong because it stops a beating heart. Right? That's how people argue for the heartbeat bill.
Yeah.
And when you say that over and over, you're going to come to believe it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's interesting how much the drive for legislation affects even the pro-lifers involved, the pro-life groups involved. So I already talked a little bit last few episodes ago about how Pro-Life San Francisco, their leadership is divided on whether or not rape exceptions are acceptable or not, which is just like so ridiculously basic. People, it's so easy to respond to that one and to understand the problem with that one. And a lot of it is the bodily autonomy stuff with it. They just accept hook, line, and sinker. But Brian Kemper's group, Stand True, he had a meme up, and this is back when I was working for Created Equal, and I was criticizing him at the time, or at least I think I did. I wanted to at least. I think I might have asked the leadership there, and they might have told me not to. But the meme said, if a life starts or stops at a heartbeat, then why wouldn't it start at a heartbeat? And I'm like, that's wrong on both counts. For one, life isn't over after the heartbeat stops because you can get it going again. Otherwise, the person who needs to get their heart going again needs to,
resuscitation is a real thing that can happen. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's already like bad on that front. And then it's bad on the other front. It's like, no, that's not when life starts. Life starts at fertilization. And here they are promoting these ageist, ridiculous memes because they have legislation that they're trying to push forward, and they're trying to just appeal to the lowest hanging fruit and get the thing passed.
Compromise breeds compromise.
Yeah.
If you champion compromise legislatively, your principles are going to get compromised. And that same meme, the one you just said, I used to admin a pro-life group, and it got really big. It has like 600,000 followers on Facebook. It's really big. And I was one of 6 or 7 admins. And that same meme, if life ends when the heart stops, then life begins when the heart begins. Yeah. And I messaged the main admin, who I'd been friends with for probably 2-3 years at that point. I said, hey, does this meme, I think you're communicating something that's false and something that dehumanizes children who don't yet have a detectable heartbeat. She didn't agree. She kept it up, and a few months later, I think I may have made a few more comments along the same lines. I kept kind of pressing the issue, and a few months later, I was out as an admin of that Facebook page. Right? Yeah, and so it's just like that. Once you embrace the strategy of compromise, it just becomes all encompassing, and everything about your movement becomes compromise, and that's what we have, and that's why we have justices like John Roberts, and that's why we have legal abortion today. Yeah, because they compromise and they compromise and they compromise, and they will make no demands, and they will submit unconditionally. Yeah, and that's why we are where we are.
Yeah, and you get made fun of a lot too for being a purist or an absolutist or anything like that. You hear all kinds of things like, you're so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good. You ever heard that one before? Oh, yeah. Which is like, have you read what Jesus said? Like, no compromise. There was none in him. Yeah. It's just so ridiculous that we're to the point now where we actually have to go in and actively debate people who are full-time anti-abortion activists, who are dedicating all their time to this. Like, they're dedicating lots of resources and their entire life to fighting abortion in these pro-life groups. And here we are getting these just ridiculous things being promoted to thousands of followers, hundreds of thousands of followers, right? That's not this purist versus compromisers here in this article. It's just so completely what's happening. Like, we are trying to get people to understand exactly why abortion's wrong, and we know they know it's wrong. And then we're trying to get the pro-life groups to argue as though it's always wrong, which is pretty Yeah. It seems like it's an easy ask, but it so rarely is, right. Unfortunately.
Yeah, no, that when I was at the pro-life group I was at, once I became an abolitionist, my thought was, well, abolitionists have been, maybe they've been kind of mean, and that's why pro-life leaders don't come around to seeing abolitionism. Yeah. And I thought, well, if I'm just like the nice abolitionist and I explain it really well and I'm not confrontational at all and I just put it in the best possible terms, how could anyone reject this? It's so clear. We need to make a principled stand. We've got to stop compromising. That's how we got where we are. It doesn't work out that way.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work out that way.
Yeah.
And there's one other point I wanted to touch from this last excerpt that we read. So he's talking about how he thinks the Democratic Party would be at an advantage because the Republican Party would be split between compromisers and purists. Now, let's go back to Oklahoma Senate District 7, where the abolitionist Warren Hamilton defeated the compromiser, the incrementalist Larry Boggs. What are we seeing now in that district? We are seeing Larry Boggs and his wife, Carla Boggs. Carla posts on Facebook saying, "My husband and I support Jerry Donathan, the Democrat. We would rather..."
The very pro-abortion Democrat.
"We would rather the pro-abortion candidate win than Warren Hamilton, the uncompromising abolitionist. We would prefer that." And so when he says that a united Democratic Party would defeat the split Republicans, it's not because in this case it's not because of abolitionists. It's because I think Warren's going to win. I think he has a really good chance to win. But if he loses, it's going to be because Larry Boggs is and his wife are telling their people support the Democrat.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's because the pro-lifers, again, it's the last thing they want. The last thing they want is to make a principled stand on abortion and say this is murder and it must be abolished. They would rather hand a Senate seat over to the Democrats than say abortion's murder and it must be abolished. That's sick.
Yeah.
It's sick. The Republican Party, its leadership is sick. And many of its members, it's a sick party. Now, there are members within it who are very good men, very honorable women. There's a lot of that. But the leadership of it and the abortion strategy is absolutely sick.
Yeah. And this is Larry Boggs. He's the guy who was when he was called to repent for not supporting the bill to abolish abortion, he was livid and he was screaming and he started saying that he believes abortion is an abomination, right? That's what he says in the video. It's an abomination, right? And then he goes and he throws his support to someone who Jerry Donathan, just recently released a video saying the exact same stance that Elizabeth Warren, that Dianne Feinstein, that Joe Biden, they all take, because he says the health of the mother is a reason for abortion. And the health of the mother
means anything,
right? You go back to Dovey Bolton and you look at the reasoning behind the definition of what health means. It can be anything. It can be psychological. It can be emotional. So if a mother responds normally to all the hormones that she is getting because of the pregnancy and she's more emotional, that's a reason for abortion right there, which is just any pregnancy at any point.
Right.
So Jerry Donathan, completely pro-abortion. Here, Larry Boggs is throwing his support behind someone who he believes is supporting an abomination.
Right.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. No, the Republican Party needs to embrace an uncompromising stance. And if it doesn't, you've got to out every single Republican who's going to compromise and who's not going to abolish abortion. Yeah. Because the Republican Party, as is not going to do it, right? As Rand Paul said, the Republican Party, they don't want to abolish abortion. They don't even want to defund Planned Parenthood. It's not that they can't, they don't want to. The Republican Party wants Planned Parenthood funded. The National Republican Party, right? Rand Paul is telling us that, right? In Oklahoma, we've seen it. It's the Republicans who are opposing abolition. And so, we've got to make serious changes within the party or support non-Republican or support third-party candidates, because we cannot keep supporting Republicans like Larry Boggs who would rather abortion be legal than abolish it.
Or people on a Republican ticket who are unseating the Republicans that are in there. I think that's been one of the most successful routes so far. And if someone can do a successful third-party one, more power to you. That's awesome.
Right.
But it's not so much an issue of whether or not you've got an R next to your name. The issue is whether or not you're actually going to do something about the injustice.
We need abolitionists of abortion with a consistent Christian worldview, whatever party. Yeah. And even if you've got an R next to your name, but you're not going to abolish abortion and you don't have a Christian worldview, you don't deserve our support. And if someone else does, then we should support them. And if no one if your senator or your rep in your area isn't going to abolish abortion, run against them. Run against them. We need to see that. Run against them in the Republican primary. Yeah. We've got to start seeing that happen, because the Republican Party, as is, where the leadership's currently at, does not want to do anything about abortion. Right now, they have the coziest arrangement in the world. They've got the best get out the vote project for themselves in the world, and they don't want to lose it. It's all about maintaining their own power. and they don't want to make any kind of stand against abortion. So in any case...
And regardless of whether or not they're passionate about certain things that would make them want to keep their power. Like, there may be some Republicans in there that care a lot about some things, like, I don't know, the Second Amendment, right? Or free speech or whatever. And they just don't care all that much about abortion at all, right? And so they want to maintain their power because of some motivation other than actually doing the right thing and abolishing abortion. Even that should not be tolerated. It does not matter why they're in there, what they're passionate about, whether or not they're doing some things that you're supportive of, whether or not you think that they're doing a good thing. What matters or not is whether or not we're going to allow the tyranny of abortion to continue and the mutilization and murder of preborn children.
If someone is willing to allow genocide, I don't care if they reduce my taxes a little bit. They're allowing genocide. Like, that's crazy that you would support someone for, it's not to say abortion is the only important issue, right? It's not, right? Economics are important. Stuff about education is important. There are important things, but it's like, if you're wrong on genocide, you don't get my support. Like, that is the most, I mean, how can that not be the stance of every single person, right? It has to be the stance of every person. We cannot keep allowing these people who enable genocide to continue just because, even if they're good on something else. But in any case, a lot of the Republican establishment people who are bad on abortion are actually bad on a lot of other things too. But in any case, if you're for genocide, I don't really care what else you're good on. So anyway, so this article was written. We've gone through all the excerpts that we're going to go through, and there was a leftist in Bloomberg. Her name is Frances Wilkinson, and she actually wrote kind of a follow-up article to this one, and I think it's a really interesting one. And so let's go through some of that. This is titled "Amy Coney Barrett and the Republican Abortion Scam," and this is by Frances Wilkinson. It was published in Bloomberg. She writes, "One of the longest cons in American politics is the Supreme Court's perpetually just around the corner repudiation of Roe v. Wade. Amy Coney Barrett, President Donald Trump's third nominee to the court, will be the latest test of whether Republicans can sustain their 4-decade-long rhetorical assault on Roe, during which conservatives have dominated the Supreme Court without ever taking responsibility to end abortion rights." This leftist get it. This leftist in Bloomberg opinion, you'll see later on the article, she's fully in support of abortion, but she sees it. Republicans have had the Supreme Court. There was a few months when Antonin Scalia died. There was a few months of a 4-4 tie, 4 Republican appointees, 4 Democrats. Other than those few months between Scalia's death and Gorsuch's confirmation, there's been a Republican majority the entire time since Roe. And like we said, in 1992, there was an 8-1 majority, not even close, right? But there's been a Republican majority for the entire time, but yet Republicans have dominated the Supreme Court without ever taking responsibility to end abortion rights.
And it's a good thing they have, too, because if they hadn't dominated the Supreme Court for all this time, I think we'd still have a lot of pro-lifers saying, if we can just gain the majority, any one of them would be willing to, overturn Roe v. Wade. We just need to gain the majority. No, we've had the majority. We've had all nine of them. One of them a Democrat, 8 of them Republican appointed. They didn't do it.
Yeah. It's like
they're not going to do it.
It's the definition of insanity. Really, the pro-life movement is fit. Their strategy fits the definition of insanity. Right? We've had it the entire time. We've had the Supreme Court the entire time.
Yeah, and I love that. I love the satirical nature of a little bit of this, or her sarcasm in this. The demise of Roe began under President Ronald Reagan, who appointed 4 Supreme Court justices. Somehow Roe survived. No matter. Reagan's anti-abortion successor, George H.W. Bush, added 2 more appointments to the court, making a total of 6 new appointments for the anti-abortion movement. Roe was as good as dead. We've got it. Yeah.
Good as dead.
Yeah. 3 decades later, it's a credit to Republicans' appetite for hypocrisy and to the anti-abortion movement's tolerance for betrayal that the game is still going.
Right, that point right there, right? Everyone sees it. Very, very few people will say it this openly, but everyone can see it, right? The Republican and the pro-life movement's appetite to be betrayed, to be consistently punched in the face by their own nominees, by the people that they championed. Their tolerance for having that happen to them is unending.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you want to get a pro-lifer mad, you talk about activist judges, right? That's the thing that will make them so mad. And then that should make anyone hopping mad, right? Because they don't respect our Constitution. They don't respect the rule of law. They don't respect the elective process. The fact that someone actually has to get elected in order to make laws, that'll make them hopping mad. But when you think about it, it's not the people that are activist judges that are the problems. It's the people that are not supportive of precedent that are problems. It's the people that are slapping them the people that support precedent are the problems, right? Those are the people that are the issue for pro-lifers, and the activist is what they get mad at. It's like, it's better, you should have an activist for the Constitution, which is just like, someone who actually does their job, maybe. That would be nice. Yeah,
so Republicans will rail all day and twice on Sunday about activist judges, but they continue to support judges who accept as gospel the precedent of the activist judges.
Yeah.
And so there's no point in opposing activist judges if you're going to support judges who will submit unconditionally to the precedent of the activist judges.
It's really the perfect scheme for the pro-abortion side, because they can get these justices in. They don't need to get a whole lot of them, but they can just get these justices in. They make a bad precedent, and then they know that all these conservative justices are going to uphold it forever. What. So it doesn't really matter ultimately, and they'll act like it matters. They'll act like this is the end of the world. Abortion is coming to an end. This is horrible. And everyone will do that. All the pro-lifers, they'll go and they'll do that. They'll say, it's going to end. Hooray. Roe v. Wade is coming to an end. And they'll get everyone excited and all lazy, right?
It's a charade.
It's a charade.
Every time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Every single time.
And this is where you can really see that she's on the left. She says, yes, over time, abortion rights have been curtailed for women in red states, but the anti-abortion movement was promised a great deal more than that. It's like, this should make you angry. Here's someone who is looking in at the pro-life movement, who's honestly taking an assessment of it from a left-wing perspective and saying, you guys are getting completely
destroyed. It's because you're weak. It's because you're weak, and I see how weak you are, and I'm going to make fun of you. I'm going to make fun of your appetite for hypocrisy and your tolerance for betrayal.
Yeah, it's like how...
She's probably just, her mind is blown, right, as she watches the pro-life movement, because she thinks, man, we would never do that, right? We would never tolerate judge after judge doing this and still support whoever had the D next to them. We would never go for that, right?
It's that age-old principle that, you have the high school bully or whatever, and the little kid that's getting beat up by him, and if he puts up a fight for long enough and he just does enough damage to make it not worth it to pick on him anymore, he won't do it anymore. And that's what the Republican Party is, and you got this little kid that's getting picked on endlessly by the Republican Party who's just abusing them constantly, and they don't do anything about it. They're not the ones who are punching back. They go and they bring food to the bully, and they give the bully all kinds of lunch money and all kinds of things like that. And they pay the bully lots of money to make sure he gets to do what he gets to do. And they never, ever stand up to him. They never punch him in the nose and teach him that you can't do this to them anymore. That's what has to happen. It has to sting. Every time they do this, it has to sting. They have to lose seats. They have to be trashed in the press. They have to constantly be harassed and told, this is not what we want from you. You are failing us. You are not beholden to the pro-choicers you're supposed to oppose. Get out of office. You do not belong in there if you're not going to fight this. It's ridiculous. That's what we should do. But instead, we're just going along to get along.
For a second, as you were doing that, I was imagining in my head, would a pro-lifer ever say this? And then I kind of internally laughed a little bit. Like, no, they would never do anything like that.
Yeah.
Because they will support the R no matter what.
Yep.
No matter what.
Yep.
So, anyway, continuing here. She writes, the appointment of the most recent Republican to the Republican majority court, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, illustrates the sport, right? She's acknowledging this is a game, it's sport. The Republican Party isn't actually putting up a serious fight, it's sport. On the day that she announced her decisive support for Kavanaugh's elevation to the high court, Republican Senator Susan Collins, the state of Maine's most concerned citizen, likened Kavanaugh to previous GOP appointees who had failed to overturn Roe. If, quote-unquote, conservative ideologues thought they had a fellow traveler in Kavanaugh, said the pro-choice Collins, they would be sorely disappointed. Meanwhile, over at the National Right to Life organization, it was all hands on deck to get the newest anti-abortion justice, the very same Brett Kavanaugh seated on the court. Clearly, someone wasn't on the level, but who? But who there is rhetorical. We all know who wasn't on the level.
Yeah, Yeah. So, like, we read the whole Collins quote already, just singing his praises because she's pro-choice and he seems to be supportive of pro-abortion.
We read that in last week's episode, her speech supporting Kavanaugh and how she supports abortion rights. And Brett Kavanaugh was the most pro-precedent judge she had ever talked to in her entire life. Yeah. And he would never overturn Roe with a 5 justice majority and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and I've never worked for a political lobbying pro-life organization before. I've worked for Created Equal, which they don't craft legislation or anything like that. So I can't imagine what actually goes on behind closed doors at those places. But for us, it just seemed to be muscle memory to be like, oh, new Republican appointed Supreme Court justice. We got to support him. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, it didn't even matter us when you were at the pro-life organization.
Yeah, like it doesn't even matter whether or not, like normally we would do no real strong digging into their record to make sure they were super strong. Like that was something that just sort of, it was just assumed for whatever reason that the Republican majority, for what now somehow, they have our best interest at heart and they're going to make sure a pro-life justice gets in who's going to overturn Roe. And like, that's why we supported Trump. Trump said he was going to do it. He said he was going to do it, so he's going to do it, right? He's going to put someone in there that's going to overturn Roe, even though they say they're not going to overturn Roe, and they do it all throughout the hearings. We watched the whole hearing. We were like, doesn't sound like he's going to overturn Roe. Well, maybe he's just saying that to get elected. Like, that's the kind of thing. It's like, no, you cannot accept. Maybe he's just doing that to get put on the bench. You cannot accept that. The reason you can't accept that is because if he is just being dishonest to get there,
he'll be dishonest once he gets there.
Yeah, and that means you have created a situation in which you are satisfied with someone accepting that it's unpopular to say we need to overturn Roe, and then just letting them continue.
Right.
What you need to do is work on making it so unpopular to say we're not going to overturn Roe, and then demand they stay to that standard. And then say, look, Republicans, start emailing them, say, get them out of there. We don't want them in there.
Yeah.
Like, generate calls. Say, we do not want them on the court. Choose somebody else. This person is terrible.
Yeah.
Get them out.
Yep, but no, it's blindly support. And actually, it was pretty incredible. There was a tweet from Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, and it was actually, the tweet is nothing inherently wrong with the tweet. It was a good tweet. So he tweets out, "I will not support any nominee who is not on record prior to his or her nomination, who has not prior to the nomination said Roe v. Wade was wrongly decided." Okay. Now, Josh Hawley is the first person to ever set that standard. Right? Before it, literally, the policy was just blindly support whoever it is. There was never a Republican who even asked. Never a Republican who went on record and said, I will only support them if they think Roe was wrong. Right? That happened for the first time this year.
Yeah.
Right? A few months ago. Now, Josh Hawley, I think that was a good tweet. Obviously, Josh Hawley needs to support immediate abolition. And actually, in his home state of Missouri, state senator, now Senator Mike Moon, is going to be putting forward a bill of abolition for the second year in a row. He was in the House this year. Next year, he's going to be in the Senate. There's going to be a bill in Josh Hawley's home state to abolish abortion. So Hawley needs to support that. But in any case, what was so incredible about that tweet, right, it's the first time anyone has ever set a standard of this person must be against Roe. Right? Yep. There's never even a standard set. Literally, like you said, the muscle memory was just blindly support. And that's why we are where we are.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. So continuing on the article here real quick, Barrett is publicly identified with opposition to abortion. Democrats wasted no time portraying her as a crusader who would love to scuttle Roe v. Wade right after she realizes the GOP goal of relieving millions of Americans of their health insurance.
She's talking about sarcastically, she's going to overturn Obamacare.
Yeah. Maybe Barrett is fanatically committed to extinguishing abortion rights, or maybe she's more like Michael McConnell. In an extraordinary essay last week in the Washington Post, McConnell, a conservative legal scholar and former federal judge, acknowledged the long GOP scam, calling Roe the roadrunner of all presidents. Wile E. Coyote just never catches up. That's exactly what we just read his article.
Right.
Really, really good piece. And obviously the commentary here is just exactly correct. Barrett probably is never going to overturn Roe. And it's just ridiculous to think that we're finally getting a justice that's going to do it.
So Wilkinson continues, Barrett, in McConnell's telling, is just the latest right-wing contraption to arrive from Acme, the prelude to another explosion in the face of the anti-abortion movement, right? Wilkinson, a leftist, knows it's coming. right? It is coming. Get ready for it, right? Roe is not going, like there's the tiniest of tiny chances that it is, but it's almost certainly not coming.
There's
right?
pretty much no chance. No.
Pretty much no chance, yeah. And Wilkinson knows it. So get ready for it.
Yeah.
Because it's coming. And we've got to stop with this insanity. We've got to stop. So she continues, while castigating liberals for seeking political outcomes from the constitutional penumbras, McConnell argues that Barrett's appointment won't lead to the overturn of Roe because, quote, unquote, the politics would not be kind to pro-lifers. And then she quotes from the Washington Post article about talking about how it would split the Republican Party and it would pit the purists against the compromisers and all that. She quotes that. And she says, so there you have it. On one side, a sworn commitment to the sanctity of life and the belief that abortion is the byproduct of Satan. But on the other, a potentially nasty GOP primary. Who could blame the Republicans for secretly hitching a ride with Satan?
Yeah.
Right? You're being mocked. Pro-life movement, pro-life leaders, pro-life politicians, you're being mocked. And they know this is going to blow up in your face again, and it's going to blow up in your face. So get ready for it.
And she's not wrong to mock you. Like, she does a really good job of it, too, because this is exactly what abolitionists have been saying for a long time. You can abuse the pro-life movement endlessly. You can do whatever you want to them, and they're still going to do whatever you say. Because at the end of the day, it's like there's no demand, there's no teeth, there's nothing that they're actually going to do.
Yeah, they're not going to make a firm stand anywhere. No matter how many times they're punched, they're always going to submit. They're always going to keep blindly supporting the R. And that's why we are where we are.
Why we are where we are, yeah. I just like the R there.
Very good.
Well, like they don't use their millions of dollars, their organizational millions of dollars to get rid of these Republicans that are doing these awful things. Like they could make a serious dent on the state front. They could do it so easily. And they don't even know that they have that much power. Like we're doing it right now with no money. With so little money.
Yep.
And they could do it with millions of dollars.
Right. So Free the States, we have a staff of now three and a half people. Right. We just added Rachel Berkey on a part-time basis. So we have 3.5 people now and a very small budget, a budget that's about 1/10 of the organization that the pro-life group that we used to work for. And
smaller than that.
Yeah, probably even less than 10%. And we had a rally with between 2,000 and 3,000 people there, and the incremental pro-life rally had a few hundred. Right. We are changing the political paradigm with very few resources, very few full-time people, and they've got giant staffs of 18, 20, 30, 40. I mean, Susan B. Anthony list, National Right to Life,
huge.
I mean, National Right to Life is hundreds. If you count all their state-level affiliates, hundreds of employees. Yeah. But there's no change because their strategy is compromise.
Yeah.
And so they're not moving the needle anywhere politically. They're not moving the needle culturally.
Yeah.
Nothing, because compromise always begets compromise.
Yeah. And, beyond that, it's like, it's not even the fact that it's like it's not Free the States that's doing it. It's like we're presenting a good idea that's biblical, that when Christians hear it, they want on board.
Amen.
And when pastors hear it, they want on board.
It's an extremely important point, right? It's not, I think we are good at what we do. I think you're a really good creator of videos. I think you're a really good writer. I think I'm a decent writer. I think Russell's one of the best artists in the world. I mean, he's incredible, right? I think we do what we do well, but it's not because of us. It's because of this ideology that is powerful.
Yeah.
Because of the power of putting forth a consistent ideology consistent with God's word.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you put forward something powerful and you let it stand on its own merit and you don't compromise and you don't come up with your own worldly schemes. You just put the truth and you put it forward boldly and you let the truth do the work. And bold Christians will rally to you when you take bold stands. And so like one of the things, a pro-life leader who we both know and love, we were listening to his radio show earlier and, he was saying, there's not the Christian support for defying the Supreme Court, right? If we do it, the Christians aren't going to rally to it. Well, why don't the Christians rally to it? Because no one's telling them to, except the abolitionists.
Yeah.
And you put down, you denigrate the abolitionists, right? The only people calling for Christians to that righteous standard of defying the evil tyranny of Roe v. Wade are being denigrated by the pro-lifers, right? And so it's very important that we don't just throw up our hands and say, the church isn't going to do anything righteous, and so let's just compromise because the church, isn't going to rally behind us. call the church to rally behind you.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that in Oklahoma. The Free Will Baptists, the Southern Baptists, both passed resolutions supporting SB 13, supporting the immediate abolition in defiance of the Supreme Court. Right? If you put the truth forward boldly, bold Christians will rally to you. And we're seeing that. And the pro-life movement needs to learn that. Rather than just throw up their hands and say, well, the church isn't going to come behind us. Yeah. Right? It's just this very defeatist mindset, and they've got to get out of it.
Yeah, and I love how she ends this article. You would think that this was written by a abolitionist when she writes this article like this.
It's good.
Who could blame Republicans for secretly hitching a ride with Satan? Right? Because on the other hand, a potentially nasty GOP primary, that's the thing that they want to avoid. And this is so true. Like, this person didn't have to work with pro-life groups to know this, but it's so true. They have policies against criticizing the Republican people they work for, the other pro-lifers they work with. They do not want to be doing that, which is exactly what has to happen. It's like these people that go in and they lobby, they go and they have their little check marks, that will go up on their website if someone votes with them. And that's really the only pressure that anyone gets. But they are nice to the people they go into, like, fine being nice and everything. But they'll be super nice to the Republicans they're talking to. If they reject anything they're saying, they're like, okay, we'll try again next year for your vote type thing. They're not like hardcore for this stuff. They're not saying pressure. They're not saying,
they're not acting like abortion's actually murder.
Yeah. They're not saying we're going to fight you tooth and nail if you don't get behind this thing. And not when I say this thing, I'm talking about compromise bills that don't do anything. That's not going to get Republicans in any trouble. They will not fight for something that's stupid. So why would they fight for something that's strong? But that's exactly what they have to be doing.
Right.
And this is just, another example of a great example of the ridiculousness of the pro-life movement on this front. And she mocks them so well.
Yeah. And I think this episode, we went through a lot of stuff. A lot of it's really good. This Washington Post article, this Bloomberg article. But if there's one thing you really remember, right? Remember as much as you can, but if there's one thing, remember, the Republican Party would rather keep abortion legal so that they can keep fighting it with worthless regulations. They would rather that than take a principled stand. That's what they want. At least, I shouldn't broad brush the entire party, but the leaders of the party and many of the party's members would rather Roe stay the precedent so that they can continue putting forward worthless regulation after worthless regulation and get celebrated by pro-lifers for it. That's what they want. They don't want to actually have to take a stand and say abortion's murder.
Yep.
Even with Roe v. Wade, without Roe v. Wade, they don't want to avoid. They want to avoid that at all possible costs.
Yep.
And so that's what people need to know.
Absolutely.
And they've got to act based on it because we can't just keep blindly supporting the R. Again, that's why we are where we are.
Yep.
So.
We need to quit.
Yeah. So that is this week's episode on the Liberator podcast. As we mentioned during the podcast, a lot of this content crosses over with last week where we talked about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh and a lot of the current justices. And so I would encourage everyone to go back and watch that one as well if you have not already. A lot more good Supreme Court content there. And also, Free the States runs. We write articles, we create artwork, we make these podcasts with the help of our financial supporters. We wouldn't be able to do it without their help. And something else that we like to do for our financial supporters is give away that artwork. So as many of you know, Russell is an awesome artist, and the artwork we're giving away this month is over behind Sam. This one right here. So yeah, if you donate, if you go to freethestates.org and become a monthly supporter of Free the States, we will put your name in the container, and you will be eligible to win this at the end of the month.
And this is also part of a new drop card that we're going to have on our store pretty soon, which will be up hopefully within the next couple of months.
Yep. So yeah, anyway, that's this episode. Thanks so much for watching, and tune in again next Thursday.